Let me start with the panelists and we'll take the question answers at the end, depending upon the time left. So we have five panelists. As already I have mentioned, Dr. Rubina Vora, Dr. Mihir Kulkarni, Dr. Haresh Patel, Dr. Ravindra Nikhalji, and Dr. Sachin Soni. So randomly, I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to start from scratch as if I'm going to restart the entire transplant program in my unit. So the first question goes to really Dr. Rubina Vora. So if you can take this question. So if I have to start the transplant program, what are the additional requirements pre-transplant in my center? I specifically mean all the precautions, including whether I have to make any changes in operation theaters, the team, or the transplant room where the patient is going to come back after the transplant. What do you suggest? Do you recommend any changes to be made prior to start of transplant program?
Yes, we have to make.
You're not audible, Dr. Rubina?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now am I? Yes. So I was just saying that we need a lot of changes. If I come to infrastructure, then if you are dealing with COVID patients, then you have to separate your pathways while you are transporting your patients from OT. That path should be different. If you are using a common lift, so you have to, like our hospital, we had a common thing. So it was separated. Like we have made two different units. One pathway is going to the hospital and the other pathway is going to the KTU and our unit. So if it is possible in our hospital, we have to like make the pathways so that we can transport. Then we have to train our staff. We have to take care of first our staff. We have to screen them. We have to educate them that how to handle the transplant patient. Then our dialysis unit, our patient is going, suppose you are handling the same patient, same unit, so you have to make changes whether you are taking COVID positive patients also. So many changes in infrastructure, many changes in our staff which are dealing with the things. Then our mind makeup, because initially we never used to think about infection which will be spreading so far. Although we are always worried about infection in our transplant patients, so we do take care. But this time it is highly contagious. So we have to be like more. So we need lot of changes, including our attitude, our staff, our infrastructure, and then screening of our recipients and donor.
Tarun, may I add something?
Hello? Yes, Ravindra, please. Yeah, please.
Yeah, hi, Tarun. So, I think for the first time, I have realized the importance of ID in your hospital, the infectious disease specialist. You need to have a very, very good infectious disease specialist to guide you on the screening, isolation, treatment, and and to make the pathways. As a nephrologist, we know, basic principles of infection prevention in our transplant recipients. But the way the COVID has come and the way it has taken everybody by surprise, and the incidence and the prevalence, I think you need a very good ID team with you. Without which I think it's very difficult to manage these complicated pandemic. So I'm sure all of you probably has, but then if not, then at least a nice a good medical internist with a ID background who can really guide you well. You need a very good microbiology setup. Okay. You can't wait for you can't outsource your RT-PCRs and wait for the RT-PCR to come next day. You need a very good laboratory setup where you have reports in like 2 hours, and you don't wait to start treatment, or you don't wait to isolate the patient. So good ID backup from the doctors, good lab support. Also, if you are doing all the markers like IL-6 and your ferritins and D-dimers and all those things. So I think it is very vital to run this your dialysis program or to transplant program during these difficult times. That's what I've learned in last few months.
Yeah, well taken. All these suggestions are well taken. Let's move to next question, which I have for Dr. Mihir Kulkarni. So, Dr. Mihir, can you tell us, apart from immunological risk categories, which we do in all the transplants, do you recommend any other categorization of our patients on dialysis and those who are on dialysis and then about to go for transplant categorization, as well as what do you recommend for dialysis patients who had turned positive and are now fine? So they are fine, they're back on the regular scheduled dialysis. How do you manage them? So categorization and the positive patients.
Yeah. Regarding dialysis patients, we would like to wait for at least more than 28 days after their dialysis for them to become COVID negative. I mean, after they have turned COVID negative, it's better to wait for at least 1 month till we decide on going ahead with a transplant, this thing. And risk stratification, yeah, depending on the type of patients, like if they have DSAs, if we are planning any APO incompatible transplants, if it is a young recipient, if it's an older donor, in those cases, we obviously need to consider ATG rather than basiliximab, because basiliximab will be better considering the risk, reducing the risk from the COVID point of view. But otherwise, ATG is useful for these other patients where the risk, immunological risk remains much better, higher. Patients who are sensitized, who had recent blood transfusions, it's better to consider ATG instead of basiliximab.
Yeah, I agree, Dr. Meher. So, do you also suggest that those patients who are at very high risk and who require desensitization or who are sensitized or going for ABO, should we postpone their transplant even now?
Yeah, definitely. Because yes, it is better to postpone their transplant because ATG being more lymphopenic, it is better. And considering that COVID also produces lymphopenia, even if they have recovered, if 28 days have passed the COVID, it's better to wait and for these transplants unless they are really urgent. If they have problems with their vascular access, which is impeding the dialysis, then we should consider transplanting them. But otherwise, it's better to postpone these transplants.
Exactly. That is what is mentioned by EAU also. I think you are giving that low risk, intermediate, high risk and essential like vascular access problems. You cannot wait. I mean, if somebody doesn't have an access for dialysis, they are going to die. So in such scenario, you have to take them, but low risk patients can be postponed. Now the question is, now we are already in downtrend of COVID, whether to wait or not, it will be case to case discussion. So we go to the third participant, Dr. Harish Patel. I have a question for him. So how the management of patients would change based on risk categorization? Already risk categorization was mentioned, low, intermediate and high and essential, which has been told by Dr. Mihir Kulkarni. So in selection of immunosuppression or waiting time, or you go ahead and do the transplant. This is for Dr. Harish Patel, please. Dr. Harish, are you there? Is Dr. Harish there? Yeah, Dr. Harish, can you hear me? You are not audible. I think you are mute, Dr. Patel. Can you unmute yourself? Dr. Patel?
He is not mute, but probably his voice.
Yeah, I'm not able to hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So in case of transplant, like if your patient is doing fine, no COVID before, and like the donor and patient are healthy with no previous infection, and if you have mostly because in India what we have is like life-related transplant. So most of the time your parents are donating kidney or maybe siblings. So in that situation, you have a probably good HLA match, and though you are looking with a low immunological risk. So I think for stratification like low or intermediate risk, I don't think that there is any need to wait for transplant. You can go ahead and do that. Only question arises about the transplant is like high risk. Let's say immunological high risk means like ABO transplant or maybe a highly sensitized patient. In that you have to modify your immunosuppression. Probably I would see if I can avoid emergency transplant, then I feel it is better. But if there is no option, like let's say a patient having vascular access issue and there are so many other things which makes the transplant to do a transplant interest, then maybe I would go ahead, but then I have to stratify my immunosuppression as per the patient need. So let's say like with ABI, what Dr. Kulkarni was telling, you can tide off, like rather than giving ATG, you can give IL-2 basiliximab, because anyway you have a rituximab on top of it 2 weeks prior to that, and you are also giving plasmapheresis, so your immune system is quite low, and you better like avoid T cell suppression in that situation. And like I don't think should be an issue, but yeah, as far as ABI concerned, you can avoid ATG in some of the patient.
Dr. Patel, and the practical problem which I am facing now is after 8 months or 9 months of wait, many of these patients, irrespective of their risk categorization, they are losing their funds and they are insisting whatever happened, I want to go for transplant. In such scenarios, how would you manage?
See, I don't think so now because the COVID situation is getting better situation is now. So, but you can definitely go ahead and do the transplant. I don't think should be waiting is a big issue. Only thing is that preparing the patient, make sure that you do a COVID test 3 to 4 days prior to your posting for the surgery. Keeping in the your renal transplant ICU 4 days before a transplant. And then do the HRCT of both the recipient and donor, and then you can proceed. And also make sure that whatever the transplant program, like nursing staff, including your PCA and all, they are well screened and they have no symptoms when you are running the transplant program.
Right, great. Another question goes to Dr. Ravinder once again. So the question is, what are the implications or concerns of immunosuppression in these transplant patients? I'm not talking about individual drug right now, but some of these concerns were raised by Umapati. But can you summarize and tell us once again what are the concerns of immunosuppression in this era?
I think the basic concern is about using the induction with ATG. One, because that is supposed to be depleting your lymphocytes, and that disproportionately increases the risk of COVID. Mm-hmm. But my take on the point is, if you are not going to use ATG for this fear, and if you end up with a rejection, okay, in a say even like a moderately high risk, not like a sensitized or ABO incompatible. So I think that's going to be really disastrous. If you end up with a rejection, then you have to use more immunosuppression compared to what you would have used. We have been able to use low dose ATG. I mean, low dose is like 2.5 or maximum 3 milligram per kilo, and then I don't think and the post-operatively and post discharge, if you ask them to take all the precautions which are generally taken for COVID, then I think you can get away without getting any COVID. We have not got any COVID infection post transplant in whatever transplants we have done in last few months. So that's my take on ATG. But yes, I mean, if possible, it's better to avoid transplant altogether. But then doing a transplant and not giving an immunosuppression which is necessary, appropriate to the risk of rejection, I think that may prove counterproductive. About starting patients, maintenance treatment, I think it's essentially the same what we have been practicing before COVID era. Once patient develops COVID, I think it's better to withhold antimetabolites immediately because of the lymphopenic effects. But cyclosporin or tacrolimus is continued, and of course, all of them get IV steroids. So I think that gets covered. And majority patients do well. I mean, even after withholding their MMF and all. I mean, so I think idea is to start treatment early in the course and identify who are more sicker and who need IV steroids or remdesivir. They do well.
Right, good. So another question, since we have talked about immunosuppression, you have highlighted about induction agent. I want Dr. Sachin Soni to come here and tell his opinion about the use of induction agents during this period. I mean, there are two, broadly speaking, induction agents. What do you prefer and whether you use it or not? And what are your concerns? Only about induction agents.
Yeah. So contrary to all the discussions which we had been doing, our first case in post-COVID phase was ABO incompatible transplant. So, which is kind of a mood of everyone that we should wait for such patients. And contrary to all the discussions, we had used ATG, but anyhow, we tend to use low dose ATG. And in that patient, we used about 2 mg, even not even 2 mg, I would say 1.5 mg per kg of ATG. And obviously, theoretically, it being a T cell depleting agent, basiliximab is preferred. But as you are asking my opinion, I would say I would still go with low dose ATG, especially in a scenario where you are looking at ABO incompatible transplant. And this patient in particular had very high titer, 1:1024. For whom we had to use glycosorb filtration. We also had used rituximab. So we have done all the things which are being advocated not to be done. but probably we were lucky to scrape through. Regarding, I think that was the limited question, so that's my limited answer.
Two quick questions. One is, I've seen many centers who use induction agents routinely. I mean, irrespective of the immunological risk. I know of centers who offer to everyone, and most of the time patients do opt for induction agent for possible reduction in rejections. So do you still advise doing?
Yeah. Yes, that is a very good question and very practical one. As such, we don't offer to all the patients, but of late we have started offering because that is more scientific. Basically, haplomatch transplant till date we have been very focused to use induction. But now there are certain situations where we are advocating against use. One of the patients who was being prepared as a transplant, for that patient, we had given option of induction before COVID era. Now we have told that particular patient that it is better not to use induction for you because anyhow it is like mother donor, haplomatch donor. So I agree to the point that we are kind of getting away from induction for haplomatch donors. Not for all, but definitely for haplomatch donors.
Another very good question from the participant. We have seen the evidence which was shown by Umapati that low dose ATG, lower than the normal which people were using, is also doing good, and many of the panelists also agree to that. Dr. Isha asks a question, can we also reduce the dose of basiliximab? Can we, for example, do away with single dose instead of just day 0 and forget about day 4? Can we do that? What is your opinion?
I guess yes. Without any scientific evidence, it can be done.
Tarun?
Can be done. Yeah, Ravinder, quickly, we are running short of
Yeah, so
time.
Tarun, we are trained at the same center, and so St. Michael's, there was a protocol, where they were not able to use ATG for any reason. They used multiple dosages of basiliximab, more than 2.
Yes.
Dr. Zachman used to do it, and I think this was recently done in one of the transplant patients in Jaslok. So I don't know whether it's good to reduce the dose.
Can I ask a question, because I have a luxury to do it? What do all of us do with respect to dialysis machines? And now is it a time to have a, say, just like we have a hepatitis C machine or B machine, to have a COVID machine?
See, I'll take this question at the end. Let us finish this, and then we'll open up for the panelists, because it's going to take a little more time, right? Please, sorry. So let me go back. Yes, Dr. Hegde.
Yeah, as I said, reduce the dose. Again, in pediatric transplant, when we have only, you don't have any half dose, we used to get away with 1 dose. Again, usually the second dose is to intensify the blockade. But again, in the era where there's a Brazilian paper, very good paper, is there any use of basiliximab in the tacrolimus MMF era? If it basically does by blocking the IL-2, if you already started 4 days prior and you get good MMF dose, and it is already done by blocking the IL receptor. So that is the reason we have reduced the basiliximab to an extent, and we have only 50% of the patient big induction. That is to specification, otherwise we're not using it. And again, that is the reason the basiliximab will disfavored, because it is already, those who have already IL-2 blocked because of the TAC, the beneficial effect may be very less.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Hegde. Now let me run quickly to Dr. Rubina Vora once again. Madam, can you tell us what would be your selection of maintenance immunosuppression COVID-19 era?
Maybe if you ask about CNIs, as we are seeing that CSA has a benefit over tacrolimus, so maybe we will. Maybe I will choose CSA even on that one, and then we can go, like, if we are going on dual suppression, I'll use higher steroids and CNI, and I'll go with 2 drugs. Maybe I would like to use low dose as an MMF can be avoided.
Right. So, but see what Dr. Hegde pointed out, and some of the panelists, if the risks are low, nobody recommends that you go straight away on dual drug. They usually recommend going on to 3, because we know that lowering the intensity of immunosuppression also has its own implications.
But you'll
so
agree
you said very correctly. Yeah. Cyclosporine instead of,
sometime immunosuppression,
Yeah,
suppose
yeah,
if it is
go
a
ahead.
low risk patient, we know that it's a low risk, it's a good match, we can. But what I was saying, not directly go with the dual, but you can you can choose a patient you have used. Suppose you have not used any induction, then we'll go on 3 drugs. Suppose you have used 1.5 to 2 gram of ATG, maybe you will go with the 2 drugs. You have used basiliximab 1 dose, initially you can go with the 3 drugs, and then sometimes it's more of a fear of rejection. And I will tell you one thing, Dr. Tarun, I have learned a thing from you, that initially when nephrotic syndrome used to relapse, I used to give full dose. And one of our common patients, you started that kid with a 20 mg and he's 80 kg weight and he responded in 5 days. So maybe
what you're saying, Dr. Vora, is, I agree. I mean,
I know it is not scientific. No book will say.
It has to be case-based.
So
And
sometimes we have
immunological
to
risk.
overcome our fear also.
Suppression. See, unfortunately, but unfortunately, we do not have any measurement of immunosuppression, so we cannot make a very solid guideline that this should. Yeah.
In this risk, suppose I get a rejection, then I end up using a lot of
high dose. Yeah, that is always a concern.
So
Always a concern.
sometimes you are just taking a risk.
Yeah, sure. But nephrotic syndrome and transplant are two
I know.
different.
But I was just giving you an example. Sometimes it is just you come out of your fear and take a risk. Maybe all will not respond to that. And in nephrotic syndrome, you do not have a risk. But if we do not respond in 2 weeks, you can always increase the dose. But transplant will not give you a chance. I agree with that.
Right. So next question goes to Dr. Mihir Kulkarni. In Jupiter, you do lots of deceased donor transplants. So the question is, apart from what we have discussed, we have already prepared our OTs, the pathways. We have considered about what we are going to use as induction, what we are going to choose as maintenance. Now, what separate preparation do you recommend for deceased donor transplants?
ATG has to be used sometimes. Yeah. ATG is better always for deceased donor transplants, considering even the era of COVID, because of the high immunological risk which is there. And deceased donor transplants, yes, swabbing of the prospective donor has to be done prior to, and the recipient also prior to, within at least the next 24 hours, because we have an in-house facility for COVID testing. So we swab this thing. CT chest is a must here. It is always better to consider a CT chest, if possible, of the donor, and if possible of the recipient also, before going ahead with the transplant. So these are certain precautions which we have to do, where a swab of the COVID, if possible, a lower airway specimen is always better to diagnose COVID-19, a CT chest of donor, and preferably also of the recipient. And these are some of the things, yes, we have when ATG is used in low dose.
Fantastic. Yeah, so these are the changes which you recommend for deceased donor transplant. And obviously, those who are positive deceased donor or the recipient, you're not going to proceed with the transplant, which is quite obvious. So another quick question goes to Dr. Harish Patel. And we have done the transplant now, and transplant patient has sailed through very well. Now, how do you recommend to follow them up in your OPD? The visits, the maintenance, immunosuppression, how do you suggest we should go about this?
In this COVID time, almost last 10 months, I am doing all the patient follow-up on online. And those who are very recent transplant, I encourage them to come to the OPD with just small transit to see and then go. And in terms of immunosuppression, I am not changing too much. I am just using the same triple immunosuppression what I was doing before. Only thing is that I ensure my patient to have a proper precaution to avoid infection. That's the most important thing. If they have any symptoms, just allow me, go ahead and do the COVID test. Maybe if negative first, repeat again after 2-3 days. And HRCT, I'm not keeping any window for under diagnosis or under investigation if there is any symptoms. And if they get the symptoms, then definitely MMF should be halved immediately. And then depending on the further course, how their symptoms are, I will make the further decision in terms of immunosuppression.
That's fantastic. So next question goes to Dr. Ravindra. Two questions actually in two parts. One is, what would be your target CNI levels? Because that is the only drug which we monitor by levels, right? So what would be the level of tacrolimus, or if somebody uses cyclosporine, what would be your suggested levels in this present era?
So Tarun, to be honest, we have not used cyclosporine in last many years.
Right.
There is.
So what would be your TAC level? Because the reason of cyclosporine coming up is with some evidence of less of lymphopenia and all those benefits which Umapati has mentioned, maybe some viral inhibitory effects and all these. So people, like some of the panelists, prefer that they can go on to cyclosporine. That is why I asked this question. But
Yeah, so unless there are compelling indications, but we have
Right.
not changed our practice based on that. And
Okay.
tacrolimus again,
TAC level?
based on the TAC level, based on the immunological risk, if a single haplotype match straightforward transplants mother to son, then maybe go to like say around 8 or so, and in the ABOIs or disease donor go up to 10 to 12 for first 3 months. And still,
Okay.
please.
So is it different than your routine transplant?
No,
or this
not
is
really
what you
much,
meant?
because to be honest, I'm always worried about getting rejection on hand rather than getting COVID, because that really changes a lot
Okay.
in our setting.
Okay.
Cost and complications, and then further immunosuppression. So no, not really
Okay.
much change.
And then
in the
second
tactic.
question to you, Ravindra, is if somebody gets a rejection, right? And
Yes.
let's take it for it's a T cell mediated rejection. How would you treat it, and would you treat it differently?
No, so based on the biopsy findings, if it's T cell, then yeah, steroid pulse for 3 days, increase the immunosuppression, increase the TAC, increase steroids. So we would give around 500 milligrams steroids every day for 3 days. Yeah, I've not changed it any differently from.
And
what I
then
used
what
to.
about the fourth day? Do you go back to your regular steroid dose, or you taper it off from a high dose? In this era,
No,
I'm
we leave it
talking
little.
about the current situation.
No, we leave it little higher still. Yeah, we leave it little higher, because once a rejection means, yeah, patients are definitely high, more
Okay.
immunological risk. Then there's no point kind of tapering it off very fast. So take all the precautions, but treat rejections and probably try to get creatine to baseline.
Right. So you will treat acute rejection in the same fashion. Levels you said you will maintain at the same levels. So
Yeah,
okay. So
I think so.
probably I'm coming to the end. It's already 7 o'clock, 7:03. So maybe Dr. Satish Soni, last question to you. Hello. Yeah. So if somebody gets an antibody-mediated rejection,
Yes,
how are you going to treat in current situation?
we'll treat him the same way as I am treating. Like in general, what we tend to do is, if a patient gets AMR, patient is DSA positive, then only consider for plasmapheresis. Otherwise, we just give rituximab
Okay.
and increase other immunosuppression.
So I think.
Sir, I think
Yeah.
plasmapheresis and an IVIG, they are left lymphopenic. So they are possibly the better. Even the guidelines said that, yes, again, if it is rituximab may be used, we have to use it, but it should be complementary. When they have used only rituximab versus plasmapheresis rituximab IVIG, the results were better. So
Yeah,
we may
I
have.
agree.
So we may have to again use it, but in the regular manufacturing, and we have social distancing, preventing infections is the main thing to do.
All three, yeah, all
Yeah.
three.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, rituximab is going to take away the new formation of antibodies, and plasma exchange may help in preformed antibody removal.